Assalamu alaikum. No problem, inshallah. So inshallah, we'll get started right away. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. All praise is due to God, Lord of the worlds. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family, companions, and followers. We intend to learn and to teach, to remind and be reminded, to benefit and be benefited, to improve and be improved, and to encourage holding fast to the book of God and the way of his messenger, and to call unto guidance and to direct towards good, hoping for the countenance of God and his pleasure and his proximity and his reward. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen. So, inshallah, today we're going to continue with Surah Taghabun. And if anyone would like to read the assignment from, from last week from the WhatsApp group. She made sure to cross her T's and dot her I's before going on vacation, mashallah.
The assignment was to cultivate the name of Hamid by one, praising Allah in all situations, whether good or bad. Two, creating noble actions and character in all conditions, irrespective of people noticing you, praising, or criticizing you. Three, try to do what is praiseworthy and try to choose to do the most noble thing when no one is watching or praising you.
Mashallah, thank you so much. Barakallahu feekum. I would say, like, from the three things that were summarized there, it was really the last one about doing the right thing when no one's watching, doing the best thing when no one's watching, or when it's not going to win. Even if people are watching, it's just not something that's going to win you any praise or support. It's just the best thing. Maybe it would even cause blame. So just thoughts with you all about that, about that particular assignment. Or reflections. Yes.
I found that it helped to know someone who would do that so that I could have like an example of what would that person advise me to do. So, and then it reminded me of just the importance of keeping good company.
So like, subhanAllah, so the imagining the example of someone who would do that thing is what allowed you to do that thing. Wow. Okay. And subhanAllah, the reason why I think that's really wonderful in terms of both the importance of suhbah, but for us, the ultimate one for us when we think of a human being is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then when we think about his example, we know that we have this beautiful, just impeccable image in our minds. And for I know for a lot of people it can be inspiring and also like, yeah, but he was a prophet. But if you have a living person that kind of embodies the best that you know of, and then you can think of them, you know, how would they be, or if they were with me, how would I be? Then it helps because it's like through the living example in front of you, and you know, the proximity to it is so much closer. It hits closer to home. Especially, subhanAllah, like, I mean, even the virtue or the value of this idea of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he left behind inheritors, right? So there's people who have inherited from him and they will always inherit from him until the end of time. And if you can think of one of his inheritors, for example, yeah, it's really hard to do the wrong thing. You know, if you think of someone who's, even if they're passed away, right? If you think of someone like that, but they were of more recent times, then that example is subhanAllah. That's a really, I need to write it down. The reason I give assignments is so I can learn from you guys. So I get you guys are giving me the cheat sheet, but yes, someone text it to the group, inshallah, because I really appreciate that example. Alhamdulillah. Any other reflections? Something I personally thought about was it's really hard in this day and age to do something that no one witnesses. It's hard to do something without a witness. Even if you do if there's like an online donation, okay, the person who's processing your donation, sees your name, sees your address, has your credit card information, so it's really hard to do something unseen if you're at least I want to do a comparison. When you're a college student or when you're single, it's very easy to do things that no one witnesses. When you are in a family and you have children and you have a husband and right now I'm living, alhamdulillah, with my in-laws. So, and it's a very blessed, I'm very spoiled right now. They do so much for us, alhamdulillah. But you're around, you're in company all the time. So something in solitude is a lot harder, or something that's unwitnessed is just a lot harder to do. It's going to be known. How do you hide it? That was one thing that came to my mind. And so for those who are single and who are, every stage has hidden blessings. So for those who are enjoying the single life right now, just enjoy some of the things that you can do that are good, that no one will know. And you don't have to worry about anyone knowing. Good things, obviously, good things. If there are no other reflections, inshallah, we will go to the allegorical commentary of Imam Ibn Ajiba. Am I still on Zoom? I feel like I still left Zoom by accident. I am, okay. Let me check. Okay. So last week we covered I believe it was 5, 4, 5, was it 4, 5, 6? Or was it one, I have it here, just a second. What was that? It was 4 through 6, yeah. So Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says, I'll just read the translation first, and then we're going to go on to the allegory. He knows whatsoever is in the heavens and the earth, and he knows what you hide and what you disclose. God knows what lies within the breasts. Has not the account come to you of those who disbelieved aforetime, such that they tasted the evil consequences of their affair, and there shall be a painful punishment. That is because their messengers brought them clear proofs, at which they said, shall a human being guide us? So they disbelieved and turned away, yet God is beyond need, and God is self-sufficient, praised. So here, Imam Ibn Ajiba, and I saw that we have some new people online and today. So just as a summary, when we cover the allegorical commentary, this is not the tafsir of the verses. We covered the tafsir, the actual meaning of the verses last week, but the allegorical commentary is sort of like spiritual reflections from the verses, sort of indications from the verses that Muslims in general and believers in general can benefit from personally. And usually when he's talking about, his allegorical commentaries are highly spiritual, and they tend to advise us in terms of the spiritual path. And so that's what his ishara, when he says al ishara, that's what he does. So for these verses, he says, and he's talking about here he's not saying it in terms of, I'm going to read it. It sounds harsh. He's not talking about kuffar, disbelievers. Now he's using the linguistic meaning of those who reject, right? Not disbelievers, right? So he's addressing Muslims. He's not saying you're kuffar. He's saying you rejected something, right? And he actually uses the word munkirun, right? The people who reject something, but it's in the same. This is the way the believer can sort of take the lesson from these verses, even though the verses are really, in the outward of these verses is really addressing disbelievers. So he says, "O people of rejection," he's talking to Muslims, "O people of rejection of the awliya of your own time. Did the news of those who rejected before you not come to you?" And so when I first read this, I thought, no, the news didn't come to us. Like, I was born in America. We didn't even know what this was, you know? And so, but it actually shows you how essential and how orthodox and how central the concept of awliya was in our Islamic history and in our tradition. All right. So the fact that someone like me can be born in America, attend the masjid my entire life, attend all the classes, all the seminars, and not even go all the way to Egypt and study in Al-Azhar University, and only have a very superficial understanding of what the word wali meant or awliya meant at that time, you know? Like, my assumption was we're all awliya, like, based on how it was used in lectures and things like that. Or that they have to necessarily, like, it's talking about something that's so hidden that no one would ever know this, you know? And so to discover this so late in life, the reality of awliya is, I think it's a sign of the times that we may be, you know, existing in and living in. So I didn't discover this myself. So the idea when he says, "Oh, people of rejection," I was like, I was from the people of ignorance. I just didn't know, you know? And he says, "Did not the news of those who rejected the awliya before you not come to you?" Nope, I didn't get any news actually. But he's referring to now his Imam Ibn Ajib was referring to the context of his own time, and in his time, right? And he's Moroccan, right? You have this is an inescapable reality of the Islamic tradition and of the Muslim world. Like you have the graveyard of all of the great awliya of the past. You have this in different countries, different Muslim countries, and we just haven't witnessed them. Even when we visit, for example, different places. I remember when I was in Egypt, we visited a bunch of graves when I was studying there. At the time that I was studying there, like, we were right there, and I did not visit Shahr al-Ashraf with all of the family of the Prophet, major family members of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but they took us to the scholars, to the Imam Shafi'i and whatnot. And so it was like, oh, the scholars, but had no knowledge of like the weight of the family of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam until how many years later. So no, the news did not reach someone like me until much later. But here he's indicating that everyone in his time knew that this is a known reality. So he's saying, "Has not the news of those who rejected them before you not reached you?" And then he says, ذَاقُوا وَبَالَ أَمْرَهُمْ, they tasted the bad consequences of their affair. They died veiled from witnessing the divine, expelled from the square of nearness. They tasted the bad consequences of their affair in this life, which is a jazr, a state of anxiety and despair. which is interesting because it's from the meanings of al-jaza include both fear, panic, fear and, but not just, it's a recurring, it's a constant, translated as anxiety and despair. And what's interesting about that is that in psychology, anxiety and depression are connected. People who have anxiety often also have depression. So one single word in Arabic brings it together, al-jaza. And then he says, al-halab, panicked, with taslit al-khawatir, being overtaken by all your passing thoughts, doubts, worries. And he says, and they have in the akhirah adab, which is the punishment of being distanced and veiled. Now, going back to this, he talks about the punishment, the true punishment, being in a terrible spiritual state. That's the real punishment in this life for the one who has rejected the reality of the awliya. Why would that be the case? I think my husband may have mentioned it in the Sunday class. If anyone attends the Sunday class. I know Marcus, mashallah, you fed everyone in the Sunday class. So the wali is someone who has embodied the religion, the outward of the religion in terms of the law, the internalized aspect of the religion in terms of aqidah, as well as the spiritual dimension of the religion in terms of ihsan. And so they're an embodiment of it. When you think about trying to do the best thing, you thought about who's someone who embodies this, and then you can do it, right? And so the wali is someone who, because they have traversed this path themselves, they help to bring the medicine for the terrible spiritual states that we experience. And so I know my own self, my own life, before I knew about the reality of awliya, right? Let alone meeting people that you would assume this about them. We don't, la nuzaki ala Allahi ahada, but there are some people that Allah has made manifest. So one of the things that happens if you're sitting in their presence is all of your worries go away. All of your distresses go away. All of your anxieties. You were like, I was going to ask you like 30 things and I can't think of a single one right now. I'm just happy. I'm just content. I had so much before I came, and then I sat down and it's not here. And it's because their spiritual state is that high, if I can use that term, that the peace and the sakina they feel and they have with God, you benefit from their spiritual state, and it helps to remove that from you. And then that's just on the level of their physical presence, right? Or metaphysical presence. Then there's also, they will tell you things about ways to improve your life, to tread in the spiritual path that help to get rid of these things. And the worst, when I read it the worst to me was taslit al-khawatir. May Allah protect us all from that, which is to be kind of like a slave of every passing thought, right? No matter where it comes from. And overthinking is its own problem, right? Like we live in a society where even when, in terms of culture, if you're watching a movie or a show, who's the comic relief? The overthinker, the one who's just like saying whatever comes to their mind, saying it as it comes, just overtaken by that. And that's considered funny. But there are people like that who, when I have, I've talked to people who are like that, and it's very hard for them. They'll actually just burst into tears. They'll start crying because they can't control their thoughts. It's not like a medical condition where they need to take a drug or something. It's that once something's in their mind and it's like pushing something, it's really hard for them to get out of it. And it's its own kind of adab. It's its own kind of like torture in a sense. And so the blessing of the awliya is they're healers. They're people who help heal us. And for us, the spiritual path and emotional, psychological healing is connected. They're not separate. This one's not secular, and this one's, only when you pray. They're actually together. And so the true sheikh often has a lot of like healing abilities. His presence is healing. To reject them means you're rejecting the source of your spiritual healing. He says the reason for that, and he says, is the rejection of khususiyah, which is the special nature of them because they are your fellow human beings. So he wants the people who reject the awliya, they don't like that another human being can have some kind of spiritual gift that they don't have, right? And so rather than welcome them, rather than want to benefit from them, they may either feel jealous or they may simply just not want to have anything to do with someone who has that, out of the resentment that they don't have it. So they deny them and turn away from them. And then he says, Allah is not in need of them or in need of their tawajjuh, which is their directedness. And he is not in need of all creation. And this is his reflection from when it's described, I think it's a Ghaniyun Hamid, yeah, in the 6th verse. He says, the people who disbelieve in the reality of these people falsely claim that they were veiled by the creation from the Creator, but he will not resurrect them except based on the strength of their beliefs. So what he's saying is that they try to make they're gonna try to make a false claim, here a lie, that it's because I was so busy in the asbab, essentially, but with creation, that I wasn't able to focus as much on God. And so they're also claiming that God will resurrect them based on their own, like based on the fact that they meant well. They meant well, it just didn't get as far as they wanted it to get. So he says, say, no, you'll be resurrected as you lived, veiled from Allah, the real, except on rare occasion. Because a servant dies upon that which they live and are resurrected upon that which they die. And this is when they say on that which, it's referring to the ma'rifah, the knowing of God, or the rejection or the denial of him, or the denial of his religion, or denial of aspects of his religion, the denial in general, because a Muslim can believe in God and not deny him while denying a lot of different realities of the faith. So whatever their state of ma'rifah is, that's what they will be resurrected on. Whatever their state of denial was, that's what they will be resurrected upon. And he says, then our deeds will be accounted for. The smallest and the biggest will not be ignored or missed, in contrast to the arifin. And then, this is really beautiful. Like I said, I think that one of the nicest things about reading this for us as a collective is how standard or as an understanding these names were and these realities were for people in our tradition. He says, except for the arifin, he says the mizan for them will not even be lifted. They're not even gonna have their deeds weighed. They will not face hisab at all, no accountability. There's not, because they extinguished themselves and they remained through God. And so essentially they're resurrected, their state of love for God is so great, is so high, that, and spiritually, their station is so high that they will not have hisab and their mizan will actually not be weighed. According to Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says there are 70,000 people like this, and with Allah's tawfiq. So he's saying 70,000 people, that doesn't give me a whole lot of hope in terms of human history. So this is like the elite of the elite of the elite. But there are people that are like this, and Allah has created them, and they are sources of benefit and light. And that even they say their physical presence is even more beneficial than what they were to do for you if they were to spend their time just serving you, right, and doing things. They do spend their time serving you and trying to be a benefit to you, but their physical reality in the world is even greater than that. So that's Ibn Ajiba on the reflections of these verses. And now we're going to go to the tafsir of, inshallah, today we're going to cover verses 7 through 9. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم زعم الذين كفروا أن لا يبعثوا قل بلى وربي لتبعثن ثم لتنبؤن بما عملتم وذلك على الله يسير فآمنوا بالله ورسوله والنور الذي أنزلنا والله بما تعملون خبير يوم يجمعكم ليوم الجمع ذلك يوم التغابن ومن يؤمن بالله ويعمل صالحا يكفر عنه سيئاته ويدخله جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها أبدا ذلك الفوز العظيم. Those who disbelieve claim that they will not be resurrected. Say, yeah, by my Lord, surely you shall be resurrected. Then you shall be informed of that which you did, and that is easy for God. So believe in God and his messenger and the light we have sent down. God is aware of whatsoever you do. The day that he gathers you for the day of gathering, that is the day of mutual dispossession. And that's the translation for Taghabun. In other places translated as deprivation. And whosoever believes in God and works righteousness, he will absolve him of his evil deeds and cause him to enter gardens with rivers running below, to abide therein forever. That is the great triumph. I just want to quickly look at the time. Okay. I'm actually hoping to finish by Maghrib today, because the tafsir was shorter. So it's mentioned that they claim, right? This is the word za'ama, which we said before, indicates lying. And it's refers to false claims of knowledge. And here what they're lying about, let me go back, is that they will not be resurrected. So it's a lie because they can't say this out of anywhere. They have no idea. They didn't create themselves. They didn't create the universe. They have no knowledge of this for them to be able to say this will not happen. So it's inherently a lie, right? It's kind of like if I'm sitting here and I say, someplace in another, I don't know, the mosque that's in Texas is in a particular city in Texas is closed right now and it's not going to reopen. Like, what do I know? I'm sitting right, I have no knowledge of that, right? It's inherently a lie. No matter what I claim about that, it's a lie. It's not mine, right? It's not something I have access to. These are people who are saying something about resurrection. You didn't create yourself. You didn't cause yourself to be born. So how do you have knowledge of something like what's going to happen after you die, right? You don't have it. So what you say is necessarily, if they were to say, and this is repeated in the Qur'an, why do you speak of that which you have no knowledge, right? It's better to be like, I don't know. The agnostic says, I don't know what's going to happen after I die. At least there's a little bit more honesty in that. Here, there's a claim that, no, it's not going to happen. Have you guys ever met someone who said something with certainty about something in the future? And you're like, how? But they said it with such conviction, like, no, I know this, right? It's not like maybe this will happen. Maybe there's a high probability, or so-and-so said this might happen. No, they'll say, it's like we have no knowledge of things to speak in those terms. So it says, say by my Lord, truly you shall be resurrected. Here, the disbeliever's denial of resurrection is made explicit. In other verses, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing the rejection of the disbelievers, the form that's used to describe it, like in the Arabic language, is one of ta'ajjub, which is amazement or disparagement. It's tahqir, like, how could you say this? How could you, and there's an example in Surah Al-Safat. When they say, when we have died in our dust and bones, are we to be resurrected and our fathers of old? And this idea of them saying something with, maybe sarcasm is the wrong word, but it's like incredulousness, right? It's mockery, it's insult. I covered this last week. I did. Okay. So today is actually 8, 9, 10. Forgive me for, I was like, why is this so familiar? Why do I feel like you guys all know what I'm talking about already? It's not just that you're with me in my mind when I'm preparing my notes. The 10th verse, we're also going to get to today. والذين كفروا وكذبوا بآياتنا أولئك أصحاب النار خالدين فيها وبئس المصير. And those who disbelieve and deny our signs, they are the inhabitants of the fire, abiding therein. What an evil journey's end. So here, then we're starting at the 8th verse. So believe in God and his messenger in the light. Yes, we have sent down. God is aware of whatsoever you do. There's different interpretations about what is the light. فآمنوا بالله ورسوله. Now here it doesn't say رسوله. It says رسوله, single messenger, his messenger. وَالنُّورِ. What would you imagine an-nur means in the context of this verse? Iman? Okay. The knowledge that came with the Prophet. Any other thoughts? Jannah? The Qur'an, yes, the revelation. So those are the two opinions, is that it's the light primarily in tafsir in this context, right? Because it's referring to believe in God. His messenger is clearly the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in this context. وَالنُّورِ الَّذِي أَنزَلْنَا. Right? So the light that Allah has revealed, we have sent down, anzalna. And so Imam al-Qurtubi, Imam al-Razi, Imam al-Tabari, Imam al-Zamakhshari, and Imam ibn Ajiba, they all say that the light here refers primarily to the Qur'an, though it can also be referenced or understood as a reference to divine guidance in general. Imam ibn Ajiba, he says, it's the Qur'an as it clarifies the realities of things, so one is guided by it, as one is guided by light, by physical light. And he also mentions, well, yes, we'll leave it at that. In the Quran, light is frequently associated with the guidance that comes through the prophets and revelation. In both Surah As-Saf and Surah At-Tawbah, the Quran mentions those who would try to extinguish the light of God, which in relation to this verse could be read as an attempt to conceal divine revelation. Okay, so the people that came before are claiming there's no afterlife. They want to reject the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. They want to reject God, right? They're in that state of denial. Here, the command is to believe in God, to believe in his messenger, and to believe in the light that he has revealed. And there's a connection to the fact that the people who disbelieve want the light of God to be extinguished. You know, in reference to the seerah, what were some of the things that, maybe you guys know this, in terms of companions who wanted to indicate or to maybe make people believe that the Quran was actually not a sacred scripture that was revealed by God, or a sacred revelation? What were some of the ways in which they tried to extinguish the light of the Quran in that time when Quran was revealed? They would claim it was poetry. They would claim it was black magic. Don't go near it. If you go near it when they're reciting Quran, you're going to come under a spell. It's called light. It's not a spell. And so they would try to extinguish that reality. Another thing that would happen, which was so sad, is they would try to compose their own poetry to compete with the Quran, to show that their poetry was somehow on par. The wife of Abu Lahab tried to do this, and it was just absurd. There was no comparison. Now, in this particular verse, there's a transition. In the first part of the verse, it's addressing you. So you, it's command form. You, or here you could say the Quraysh as well, in terms of the direct recipients of this verse. So you believe in God and his messenger and the light. Now, normally, if you're going to say something like this, you would say you believe in God believe in his messenger, believe in the light which was sent down. You would say which was sent down, right? Or which has been sent down to you. It would still be in the third person. But there's a shift. It moves to the first person majestic, right? The royal or the noble we. And then Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says that the reason why it shifts from speaking to in the third person, essentially, to speaking in the form of the majestic we, is because of the completeness of the care of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for his revelation. So the light, not that he sent down, but that we have sent down, emphasizes the connection of that light coming directly from God. God is aware of whatsoever you do. And here the focus, Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says, is whatsoever we do of obedience, whatever we do of compliance with his message or disobedience. Yes, thank you so much. That answer was right. I'm sorry for seeing it late. Verse 9. The day that he gathers you for the day of gathering, that is the day of mutual dispossession. And whosoever believes in God and works righteousness, he will absolve him of his evil deeds and cause him to enter gardens with rivers running below, to abide therein forever. That is the great triumph. Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says, that this day of mutual dispossession, this day of deprivation, it happens because people in this world, like Taghabun is when people cheat each other or they rob each other. And this is something that is done to the extent where in this world, if it were to happen between people, the purpose of it is so that those who are wretched, on the bottom, come on top, and those who are on top, they come to the bottom. And he says this happens on the day of judgment. This is a description about what happens on the day of judgment, because on the day of judgment, the people who they thought they were doing well, let's say, in this world, they become the wretched. And those who were wretched in this world, they were unhappy. Maybe they were harmed. Maybe they were oppressed. Maybe things were taken from them. Then on the day of judgment, they become the happy. They become the ones who are the sa'ada. Also, this verse has a hidden, so you know how there's like hidden verbs or hidden words. Here, where it says Yawma yajma'ukum, there's a taqdeer, or there's a word that's muqaddar, which means implied, which is mention the day that he gathers you. So again, because the previous verse is so believe, right? There's a command. So Yawma yajma'ukum is so mention. That's one of the opinions. The other opinion is that it's Yawma yajma'ukum, the day that he gathers you. You will certainly be informed of the day that he gathers you, for the day of gathering. So that's the other implied meaning that could be there. Also, here the day is referred to as liyawm al-jam', the day of gathering. And Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says the first and the last of creation will all be gathered together for hisab and jaza, for accounting and for the distribution of the consequences, really. You can't say jaza refers to both reward and punishment. So whatever one has attained. The great triumph, Imam Ibn Ajiba says, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can wipe out all of a person's evil deeds. That is the great triumph, and then cause them to enter the paradise. And he says there is no triumph after this, to be saved from the worst of punishment and be granted the best of rewards. There's no winning after this win. This is the ultimate win. And then he also mentions one of the reasons why this is called Yawm al-Taghabun, this idea of mutual deprivation or dispossession. When you think about this dispossession, there's so many ways that this happens on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So one is that a person earns finally sees the punishment of what they did, and so they're deprived of what they of their good deeds, right? A person who has hurt you and has not atoned for it in any way in this life, their good deeds will go to the one that they harmed. So they're dispossessed, right? They're deprived in that moment. As a result, that person who has received those good deeds, their position is elevated. But it's mutual dispossession because we've all done something wrong. There's going to be someone's going to give something to you. Your good deeds may go to someone else. And again, may Allah forgive all of us before that day happens, so that none of us, inshallah, may Allah protect us from being dispossessed in that way. But that's essentially what's happening, to the extent that rights will be, you cannot cross the sirat until the rights are returned, the bridge over hellfire. So whatever things have to get set straight, they will be set straight. Imam Ibn Ajiba also comments, and he says one of the reasons that this is also called Taghabun, mutual dispossession, is because people are deprived that day by the great differences in the different levels. So all of this exchange happens between deeds because of the deeds of this life. And so the scales tip, right? A person shows up and their scales look a certain way, but after all the hisab has happened, now the hisab looks very different than how that day started. Now, that may mean that a person thought, well, look I read so much Qur'an, I did so much dhikr, I did so many hajj, I made hajj so many times in my life, I made umrah so many times in my life, I did all these worship deeds that are so big and more than other people. And then they show up on Yawm al-Qiyamah, and may Allah protect us from this, and all of those deeds go to other people because of how many people they harmed. Right? So istidraj is to do the things that a person thinks, because I'm doing this, I must be doing well, and so they're deluded about themselves. And so they don't hold themselves accountable. They can't say sorry. They don't even recognize when they've seriously harmed someone. They think it's their right to harm people. And there are people like that. And it's may Allah protect us from that. But the difference is in the degrees that are earned. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said that, and this is mentioned in the Quran as well, but that the levels, the different levels of the next life are so much more vast than the different levels of this life. So you go drive around a really nice neighborhood, the homes and everything look a certain way. Go to the nicest neighborhood you can, and they look a certain way. Then you go to the worst neighborhood that you can, and you might find straw huts, or you might find dwellings that are barely inhabitable. And the differences of what 1 degree gets you in the next life is greater and more vast than the kinds of differences that we see in this world. And so what that means is the person who got 1 level higher than you in paradise, right? The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said, it's like the person who's standing on the earth and they're looking at stars. That's the difference of 1 level. Yeah.
So when you get to Jannah, you're unsatisfied with?
No one in Jannah is unsatisfied.
Okay.
No. But that is like, okay, we're all going to be happy with whatever we get. But just to know in this life, it's worth doing as much good as we can, and rectifying our affairs while we still can, making tawbah if we've hurt someone, like saying sorry, like making amends, just doing whatever we can. It's not worth, there's nothing worth getting in the way of, not just I want to get away from hellfire. All of us want to be saved from that, but 1 degree higher is a lot higher. Like if you knew that 1 degree higher in this world is you could either be in the ghetto, worst part of the ghetto, or you could be in, I don't even know, whatever the richest neighborhood is. And it would take some good behavior. You wouldn't not have, you wouldn't belittle the smallest good deed. So he says, I mean, Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says, one of the reasons why it's called Yawm al-Taghabun is also because of the great difference in the different levels. And so similarly, hellfire is like that as well. So the punishment gets significantly worse, 1 degree lower. So just like there's an exponential increase of reward in paradise, there's also an exponential increase in punishment, depending on the kind of harm that was done. And again, may Allah protect all of us from that. Imam in Bukhari, the Prophet Muhammad, he said, no one will enter paradise except that they are first shown what their place in hellfire would have been had they turned to evil. So this would increase them in joy and thankfulness. And no one will enter hellfire except that they will be first shown what their place in heaven would have been had they been good. And this would increase them in heartache and regret. Hasra. So all of us will be shown our actual place, wherever our actual destination is when we die. But first, before we're shown that, we're first shown the place we could have gotten or would have gotten had we done, either good or done evil. And may it, for all of us, may it be that we're first shown the place in hellfire, rather than first shown the place in paradise. This day of gathering, we have to imagine that it brings together all human beings of all generations, and all jinn even will be gathered on a single open, barren plain for judgment. Each community will be behind its prophet. I mean, it's just to pause on that, like this reality that we will all, inshallah, when we're resurrected, we will be with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Other communities will be jealous of our community. Every other community except, will wish that they could have been part of our community that is resurrected behind the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. There's also a reference to the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not only gathers all of mankind from the first of mankind to the last of mankind on this day at the same time, but also that He gathers us individually on this day at the same time. So once we have decayed in the earth, right, mankind will be brought back together. Each human being, their bones, their flesh, their muscles, like their whole human form will come back. And it's also a day of gathering because it's like individually we're all gathered as human beings back into the form of a human being. And this is exactly what the disbelievers rejected. They said, "What, when we are bones and dust, shall we indeed be resurrected as a new creation?" And yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one, He is al-Jami', He's the one who gathers, and He can gather us back together just as He created us in the first place. Ghabana in Arabic means to stint or shortchange another person in a transaction. So again, it's that short, are we being shortchanged on Yawm al-Taghabun? No, it's actually the day of justice. But it's called Yawm al-Taghabun because there's going to be an accountability for all the shortchanging that happened in this life. Imam al-Raghib al-Isfahani, he says, this quality has manipulation in it. So you can't really harm someone, right, until you've manipulated them in some way or deceived them. Another opinion, and again, he doesn't cite who the reference is for this, is he says that it is used as a reference to the day of resurrection because there is no way that human beings can fully repay the debt that they owe to God. And so here he's looking at it in a different way. It's Yawm al-Taghabun because ultimately our greatest debt is the debt that we owe our Creator. And there's no way the creation can repay the Creator. And so in that, there's a shortchanging of a right, which is the right of God over us. Although every soul will be paid in full for that which they have done, no soul can pay God in full for that which God has done. And so the believer is also said to be the one who sells his soul seeking God's good pleasure, and one who would sell the life of this world for the hereafter, and not the opposite. Not to sell the hereafter for the life of this world. It says, for those who have succeeded, and in Surah At-Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes them as truly God has purchased from the believers their souls and their wealth in exchange for the gardens, in exchange for the garden being theirs. And again, such a transaction is so completely one-sided that one could be said to have stinted Rabbana, God. I don't know whose opinion this is, because it's in the study of Quran. It doesn't have a source for it. I personally don't like this interpretation because no one can we are necessarily, what is it called? We're going to have shortcomings as human beings because we're creation. But the idea that someone can shortchange God, I just feel like God is beyond and above a word like that being attributed to him in any even metaphorical sense. So I don't particularly like this interpretation. I like the previous one. Here he says something else which I think does work, which is, in addition, those who sell God's pact and their oaths for a paltry price have stinted or shortchanged themselves by not honoring the agreement in which they were guaranteed that they would be paid in full. And so in Surah Al-Baqarah, it said of them, it is they who have purchased error at the price of guidance. Their commerce has not brought them profit, and they are not rightly guided. Also, in contrast, those who sell their souls for God have their evil deeds absolved. Again, so in English, we always hear the term that this person sold their soul to the devil, right? They sold their soul to the devil. What he's emphasizing here is people who sell their souls for God. Not, obviously it's for Allah. And so someone who has done this, their evil deeds are absolved in this life and they enter paradise in the next. And attaining the garden is referred to as the great triumph in over a dozen verses because the blessings of paradise cannot be enumerated. There's an aspect I want to focus on here for this week's assignment. Just look at the time again. Okay, we're gonna do it. I'll just say quickly, and those who disbelieve and deny our signs, they are the inhabitants of the fire, abiding therein. What an evil journey's end. The signs here, our signs can either mean the actual signs of God, or it can refer to verses of the Quran. Again, those who disbelieve and deny the Quran. What an evil journey's end is that this is the return. And it's as if these verses clarify and explain to everybody the kayfiyah, or the howness of the mutual deprivation and dispossession that's going to take place on the Day of Judgment. Now, the assignment for us is actually going to go back to one word. Wallahu bima ta'amaluna khabir. And God is aware of whatsoever you do. And this is ultimately like the reminder that's coming from these verses. For us, we're right now in the 10 best days of the year. It's a time to try our best and try to internalize this meaning for ourselves, that Allah is aware of everything that we do. And it's connected to last week's assignment. I want to say that there are many different kinds of good deeds. There's good deeds that we really, as a community, we don't emphasize them, but they're like when you read about the reward of those good deeds, they indicate how much Allah loves this, right? So I'm not saying ibadah doesn't have a lot of reward. All worship, there's worship is beloved to Allah. But from what I've read, and it seems that worship that deals with bettering the life of creation in some way is very weighty. It's like, it's in comparison. I'm not saying abandon Quran, no, or abandon dhikr, or abandon extra prayers at night. I'm saying, like, if you these are the best days of the year and you want to do the best deeds in these best days, if you were to read about the rewards of reconciliation, two people who are fighting and you're able to reconcile between them, you'd be like, that's the hardest thing to do. It's probably the hardest thing to do, but it's so beloved to Allah, and the reward of it is so great. So if you have an opportunity to reconcile between people, obviously to be in the service of people who are in need of something. The virtue of doing deeds that help others, bring other people together, forgiveness, we don't talk about them as much as we might say, don't forget to pray extra, don't forget to do some extra dua. May Allah grant us both the in solitude, or the acts of worship that we are able to do, but also the acts that really deal with love and service. They're often harder. They're often ones that make us uncomfortable. They push up against our nafs, and we're like, in ways that we don't want it to. And yet, if you read about the reward, you're like, this is the best possible thing I could do. Like, this is objectively the best, some of the best good deeds that can be done. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us both. I just wanted to end with quickly just reading to you all about the name Al-Khabir, the one who's totally aware. It is said that Al-Khabir means the one who knows the minutiae and inner realities of all things. It is also said that it means, and this is Imam Ibn Ajib speaking, the one who informs others. It is also said that it means the one who examines others. He who knows that Allah is totally aware of all things will be sufficed with his knowledge and will abstain from ostentation and pretentious displays of piety to others, and will rely upon him and his guarantee of provision. It is related that someone said, I was once struck by poverty and want, and I set out to ask one of the elects, the awliya. But when his eyes fell upon me, he said, let me ask you, the need for which you have come to me to ask of me, does Allah know of it or not? I replied, of course he knows. Whereupon he said, so take your need to him. When he said that, I fell silent and made my way back home. When I arrived at my home, lo, Allah granted me provision that sufficed us. It is also related that one night in Baghdad, a child was born to a man, but the man had no food. So he set out to visit Ma'ruf al-Karhi. Ma'ruf was inside his local mosque, and when the man came in and mentioned his need, Ma'ruf said, sit over there. Suddenly there came a man that had disembarked from the Tigris River and who made his way over till he arrived at Ma'ruf's mosque. With him was a servant holding a money purse. The man said to Ma'ruf, Qahru man from the caliph's residence has sent you these dinars for you to spend on whomever you wish. Ma'ruf said to him, give them to that man over there. Perhaps feeling that the amount was too much to be given to a single person, the man said, but they are 300 dinars. Ma'ruf said, that is how I wish to spend them. So what this story indicating what, like this, the miracle that was granted or given, it looks like a miracle. It's just an indication of that Allah is totally aware. We connect with this name by pleading with Allah to make us aware of our own faults and to allow us to see forgiveness for our sins. And we connect with this name by gaining experience in various matters, worldly or otherworldly, as much as possible, and in those things that are obligatory, recommended, and beneficial. So I'm going to stop with that, and inshallah we'll just close because I'm traveling, so I forget sometimes that other people are not, and we need to pray. Let me stop the share, and then we'll end, inshallah. The assignment again for us is to do whatever as good as we can, inshallah, keeping the beautiful name of Allah Al-Khabir in our hearts, that He's well aware of everything we're doing in these 10 blessed days and all the time, but really try to every day think of something that we're really, like you are helping someone else in some way. You're doing something for the creation of God. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma wafiqna lima tuhibbuhu wa tarda wa ja'alna min abidika su'ada wa ammitna ala kalimat al-huda. علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. O God, give us success to attain what you love and are pleased with. Make us amongst your felicitous servants. Allow us to die on the statement of guidance. Teach us what will benefit us and give us the success to act upon what you have taught us. Make that in which we are engaged pure and devoted to your noble face. Ameen, O Lord of the worlds. O God, make this gathering of ours a gathering enveloped in mercy, and our parting thereafter a parting of our sins purged and forgiven, not one of us wretched or deprived. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and upon his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum. Happy 10 blessed days of Dhul Hijjah, inshallah.